Good afternoon, everyone. Principal Hollis. Principal Hollis, can you hear me?
Yes,
Are we ready to begin? Are we up on YouTube and all that stuff?
it looks like we are.
We'll make sure we have. All right. It is 4:47 p.m. I call this meeting of the David T. Howard Go Team to order. We will start with our roll call to establish quorum. Principal Hollis,
Present.
Doug Brooks,
I'm present.
Dion Eldery,
Present.
and I am here. Dr. Bryant,
Present.
Miss Nolan,
Here.
Miss Moore. All right, Miss Cattell,
Here.
Mr. Baker, and Mr. England.
Present.
All right, we have a quorum and we are ready to move on to action items of approving the agenda. Everyone should have had an opportunity to review the agenda. Are there any edits or amendments before we vote to approve? All right, I will take a motion to approve the agenda as published.
So moved.
Is that Ms. Nolan?
Yes, it was.
And a second?
I second.
All right, Ms. Eldery.
Dion.
And all those in favor?
You just hold up your hands. Fabulous.
And those are approved, and the approval of the previous minutes. Those were sent out, I want to say 2 days after our meeting. Were there any edits or additions to the minutes from the January 28th, 2025 meetings? Hearing none, I will take a motion to approve.
I'll motion.
Mr. England, and is there a second?
I'll second.
Ms. Patel? All those in favor? Any opposition? All right, and the minutes are approved. We are now in the public comment portion of our agenda. We break our public comment out into two sections, 10 minutes at the beginning and 10 minutes at the end. Speakers have 2 minutes to speak, and there's a total of 20 minutes allotted for public comment. Do we have anyone signed up for public comment?
Yes, Ben Nemo.
All right,
I'm sorry if I said your last name wrong.
No.
I do apologize.
Mr. Nemo.
Yeah, hi. Sorry, I'm in the car. Thought it was going to be a little later. I was going to ask the Go team to be open to learning from Sutton Middle School's PED policy in place. I know there's been a lot of discussion about what actions could be taken from many parents who are still interested in curbing cell phone usage in the school. I know pouches are not necessarily financially feasible, but it does seem like Sutton is onto something with a lock away policy that results in consequences if seen. So it's just a simple ask to see if we'd be open to learning about the cost benefits of their policy, see if it's something could be implemented in the school year ahead, given this time in the school year. That's all.
Thank you so much, Mr. Nemo. Any additional public comment? All right, seeing none, we'll move into our discussion items. And the big one, what we're all here for and been waiting for, the budget development presentation. Yeah.
Okay, so the meeting norms have been shared. We invite contributions from every member and listen to each other, follow the agenda. We already said that, and respect the ideas and assume good intentions. Today, we are in the budget choices. Remember, our strategic plan is our roadmap, and remember your role. It is your direction and your priorities, your vision, your present, and your future. Again, we are in the budget feedback meeting. After this meeting, we will have our review by our cluster superintendents, staffing conferences by the end of the month, and then the GO team will have the final budget approval meeting before March 14th. I think ours is scheduled for March 11th. The feedback meeting is for me to share with you my strategic plan breakouts, provide an overview for the school's draft budget. Why is this important is for us to discuss the proposed budget and how it supports the school's programmatic needs and key strategic priorities for the 25-26 school year. It provides the GO team an opportunity to review and provide feedback on proposed use of school level flexible funds. This is a reminder of what our strategic plan is. It is posted on the website as well. When is that? December, that we voted on the strategic plan priority rankings, and they are listed there. Last meeting, we went over the budget parameters and the school's priority. And they sit there with rationale. And so the last meeting I shared with you that this year we were doing something different with our signature programming funding, and that something different included starting from a zero-based budgeting system process where we listed the things that we felt like were important and what we felt like, the funding we felt like we needed from the district in order to for them to make a determination of how we would be funded. If you recall from our last meeting, the signature program fund ask was for $789,910 to include a program coach, a science teacher, a fine arts teacher, supplies and resources, travel, field trips, and professional development. After the meeting, in an attempt to provide complete transparency, principals were brought together and given an opportunity to speak or ask questions on where their signature programming funds were and I was given feedback that 789,000 was not going to be approved, and I should probably streamline that. And so what I asked for in the end was 394,000, and what we received was $273,472. With that amount of funding, that would not fund nearly anything that I asked for. But what we're gonna do is use that for the signature programming coach and to fund most of the science teacher. Should I continue, or did you want to add any comment voice there?
When do we have discussion, I think, or questions? Anytime
Have
or?
discussion now.
So last year we had 355?
55, that is correct.
So we're supposed to get to our signature program with one and a partial teacher? Is that correct? That's
That
what I'm
is
looking at?
correct.
So
That is
one-
what I received as what, I mean, that's how I would interpret what we were given. Keep in mind that the district cut $100 million overall, or needed to cut. I don't know if they did. They needed to cut $100 million, and the concern is how can we directly link the funds spent for signature programming to the student outcomes that are desired.
Signature program is in our charter, correct? I believe so, our charter with the state, that we would have signature programs and we had to identify
I
those.
believe so. If I'm not mistaken, they came when the state shifted to you deciding which lane you wanted to be in. And so I'm pretty sure that that is written in the documentation that was provided to the state. I am not for certain if it is going to be included in the revised strategic plan that is due this year, because it's every 5 years. So we're up for a re-up. So I'm not sure about that. That would be a strategy office question. I can elevate that if that is something the Go team would like me to elevate.
And last question is across the district, everybody seeing this reduction in about 50,000? Is it a blanket cut across and this was just a game with the zero-based budgeting and?
I cannot answer that. The only person's budget that I have access to is my own. I would say that for us, it was a $82,000 cut.
Right.
So
See, it's
I can't say what other people experienced. I'm sure, it's public knowledge because everybody's having meetings this week.
Mm-hmm. Seems like it was a decrease for all schools and it was not dependent upon how large the school is or if they're title funds or non-title funds. But as a non-title school, and this is one of our few extra resources of funds, I'm disappointed to see this. And I know there's others that are voting down their draft budgets tonight, so this is disappointing. Based on what I listened to your guys' conversation, last time I was not at the meeting, the date was changed, I couldn't make that. We did have quorum, but I just want to say this is unfortunate for the 1,100 plus kids at our school and the staff. Really quick question, will the signature program coach have any other responsibilities other than being the signature program coach?
Give me an example, because we all have other responsibilities.
Like, will he be charged with being the test and assessment person or is that person solely focused, that position, not person, but position who holds that, will they be able to spend a large amount of time on this since we're down to 1 1/8 or 0.8 teachers?
So we all have to implement the signature program if that is like the push of the school. And I think that the teachers can speak to that we all are tasked with helping promote and push those ideologies. It has not been my management style to ask anyone other than someone on the administrative staff to lead testing and assessment, because that is a heavy load and requires a lot of off-campus professional development in order to make that possible. So that is not my intent to use that position in that way. But will that position help to affect student outcomes in science, math, English, those, yes. I can't say that they wouldn't be used in those capacities.
Okay, and they're giving us no funding for supplies or resources or professional development. Just, I know what I'm reading, I'm just publicly saying that. Is that correct?
It's not correct per se. What
Under
the
signature
correct
program
response
fund?
would be is that they are giving us $273,472 to do with as I see fit. And if I deem that it is appropriate to use for professional development and supplies, then I can.
Okay,
But it is, as you're implying, a trade-off to use it in that way, as opposed to using it how I am choosing to use it. Does
so
that,
with no title funds, we're gonna be looking to our community to help fill these gaps, more or less. Some of them,
maybe
okay. Or a partner.
a partner, but I mean,
Maybe, yes, can get us a partner.
there's some things that we had to trade off, and we knew that we were gonna have to trade some things off. I've been saying the same thing all year long to prepare us as a community around these trade-offs. And I will now show,
Wait,
okay, you still had another question. I was gonna show
I just-
how I'm trying
what-
to manage these trade-offs with the full budget versus just looking at signature.
yeah, okay. Well, then that might answer my question, because I'm just trying to understand in real life, in the real world, how does a 0.8 of a resource work? Like, right, like you're either there or you're not. Like, do you leave?
Well,
Hours left?
I'm sorry.
No, I'm just, in practice, how does that work?
Well, in practice, how 0.8 works is you're there so many hours or so many days, right? But in a middle school, or the middle school that Takesha Hollis runs, I'm not going to ask a science teacher not to be here for the full day. So that just means that that's a backfill for the general funds to complete the rest of that FTE. Did that answer your question?
Yes, you're making it clear that there will have to be compromises other places in order to make sure we have a full-time science teacher,
Correct.
right?
So this is how our staffing will fold out based on what has been given, including those signature programming funds. One shift that I talked about last time, when you're looking at this breakdown, we were funded for 17 and a half gifted teachers, where prior we had 11 gifted teachers. So some of the core teachers have just been shifted down to the gifted slot. So it's not that we won't have the same number of core teachers, it's just they're funded differently. That makes sense.
Those are certified, the teacher gifted are all certified gifted teachers?
Yes. Was that the end of that question?
Yeah, I have some more questions about the gifted and the gifted changes from the last presentation. You said, there may be something coming down the line, and I know other Go teams presented some changes. When you said there may be some changes coming down the line, are you talking about next school year or the following school year? Would it affect this budget, I guess is my question, or are you talking about fiscal year 27?
It could affect this year's budget. The district desires us not to use one of the funding models for gifted that is still available until the next year from the state. So in trying to be in compliance with the district's expectations, then there are things that I will have to present on, but at this time, until I know for certain who is moving on and who's not, I am not in a space to discuss it, which is what I said last time.
Will that be done before we vote on the budget in March, though? Will you present that to us like other schools before we vote on the budget?
Probably not.
Can you tell us what those district changes specifically are, like some of the other Go teams are? I don't think we've.
Sure, there are
Yeah.
certain models for gifted classes to be funded by the state. Those include resource, cluster, collaborative, and there's a fourth one. Diane, if you want to help me out with the fourth one. And
I
I'm sorry.
don't know the fourth one. I just know the three. That it was
cluster,
cluster,
advanced
collaborative.
content is the fourth one.
Ah.
And so we can't really claim advanced content because that's for AP classes and IB classes in high school. We do use the collaborative model because the collaborative model says that the teacher does not have to be gifted certified, but they have to collaborate with a gifted certified teacher. But it also limits how many gifted students can be in that class under that model. And we currently use technically collaborative in that sense, but most classes are taught by gifted teachers. So that's why I said I can't really answer that depending on how many teachers say that are gifted, and it becomes a hiring game, especially since 51% of the student body are tag gifted. So it depends on hiring. It depends on who's retained or who doesn't get promoted. And then I'll be able to answer that question. If I only offer the one required gifted segment by the state, then we could say that we're in compliance with what the state will be doing in the future.
And what is the district? What did you say the district was wanting us to do or not wanting us to do?
They just wanted us to do it a year in advance of what the state is requiring.
Okay. I think I read something on that. And the state is taking away which model?
The collaborative.
Okay, so then every classroom would need that is tokened as a gifted segment would need to be taught by a gifted certified teacher by
Correct.
fiscal year 27?
Correct.
Okay.
If
Okay.
you want that segment funded by the state, yes.
Right, and gifted. Okay, perfect. Count as your gifted. Okay. Thank you so much.
But like I said, we would be in compliance if I gave up what I have to families, which is 2 segments. So I'm trying to make sure that I can still say we are 2 segments, we have what we need. There are some teachers that are finishing up that will give us our space. So it's just not something I can speak on right now with full confidence, because I know y'all gonna bring it back up. Any other questions about this? Okay. What I am proposing is to lose 1 FTE for a fine arts teacher in order to do some other things that we are creating, and to lose the non-instructional aid position. In losing those things, and with everything else that we have, we will be creating, I've already created actually an hourly security guard, which we will be sending out letters home at the end of the week to talk about what morning tutorial procedures would look like post winter break, but to add a second one in that space, the hourly reading teacher to help shore up our shift in standards and focus on literacy, an hourly ISS monitor. Currently, based on our discipline, we only have ISS Tuesdays and Thursdays, and it is not at capacity. Max at one time we have 4, today we had 0, so it's just not high. Adding a second master teacher leader with certification in English language arts, since we are having new English standards next year. Adding an hourly teacher tutor because we are losing funding for our permanent subs that we've had in schools since COVID. We will not have those 2 permanent subs. So when we are short subs or someone calls in the day of, or someone leaves early because they're sick, that person would be able to help us cover down. So I don't have to split classes and put bodies just to say that we've split them and they're covered. The science teacher that we talked about from STEM, you see is a full FTE. And then I don't want to get rid of the fine arts slot completely, so shifting that to a halftime teacher.
Could you go over what a master teacher leader is again and what that looks like, what that position looks like day to day? So we're adding one. And then could you just describe what that is? I sometimes get confused. Instructional coach and master teacher leader and the various different roles.
Can I speak for
So-
myself, or you want to answer that?
Nope. So a master teacher leader serves in the capacity to help students and staff with content. An instructional coach more so serves as teacher facing mostly only, and still helping with content, pedagogy, and things of that nature, and serves in that capacity. But I can send you to the HR website to get the physical job descriptions if necessary.
I'm just wondering what it looks like what it would look like at Howard, how they would help with our students and staff at Howard to help with our strategic priorities and whatnot.
Sure. So right now they help with like this teacher being out, going into the classroom and teaching. When we had the math teacher out in September for a continued period of days, they went in and taught some of the content, made sure the students understood what they were doing. They can do pullouts. They help with professional development. They help sit in PLCs. They help put the test in, help them analyze data. They do all the things dealing with instruction, so they hit our strategic priorities in multiple places.
So when you have this removed column, I just want to understand what that means. Does that mean that we currently have a fine arts teacher and we're no longer going to have a full-time fine arts teacher and no longer going to have a non-instructional aid, or are those positions currently vacant, or?
They are not currently vacant. I do not have any vacancies. Okay, moving on to the next slide. This is my non-staffing allocations. What are we doing with the rest of the money? And this doesn't really change much from what I've done in the past per se. The stipends at the bottom are district issued, so those come from the district and they are standard. in order to add any additional stipends, I have to use the very first column, row or second row in the bottom row above that blue line to add any other stipends. So that's where you see, we normally have pre-planning days, ask teachers to come back earlier if they're going to be co-teaching so that they can start merging that relationship earlier. And then summer bridge, we have to pay for the teacher's time in that. I think the rest is self-explanatory. One thing I will say, I did not use district funded field trips right now. I use that money to pay for other stuff that have higher ranking priorities. Not that we're not going to have field trips, and not that we don't utilize our parent organizations to help with our unhoused populations and students that may have financial difficulties, but the budget is tight. Any questions specifically? Oh, and as you can see, there are a couple lines there for a security grant. We do get the security grant next year from the state of $45,000. Those dollars that you see on those 3 rows are excluding the 2 hourly security guards, which still comes out of that $45,000. Any other questions? Okay. And let me say that I've already published the presentation to the website if you need to go back to look at it while we're discussing. The teacher sub allocation, oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I can keep going. The teacher sub allocation is there. That is a whole type from the district. The district did give us money for an ISS monitor. Again, we don't use ISS every day, so that's why I shifted to hourly. And these are just the other things we discussed.
May I ask you, you mentioned, I think back in December that we had 1 person working intervention, but last year we had 2. And I was unclear after listening to the last meetings, are we going back to 2? I know you had,
I'm sorry.
I know you
I thought you
had
were finished with the question.
said
I'm
that
sorry.
would, oh, go ahead.
I thought you were finished with the question, so I was apologizing for cutting you off. Go ahead.
Okay. Sorry, I'm sitting in the car outside of the gym. I know when we were having a conversation about intervention and support, we talked about that we had 1 this year during our literacy presentation that you gave us, and that last year, I believe you said we had 2, and in an ideal world, if money was no object, you would want 2 again for our students. Will we have 2 next year? I was unclear with last month's presentation if we're going to be having 2, going back to 2 or 1.
So I cannot afford to have 2. I am adding the hourly reading teacher, as you see there, to serve in that capacity for that reason. So I'm trying to get us back to 2, but not quite financially ready for 2 completely.
And that reading, that hourly, what does that mean? How many hours? Does that just mean it's under 39 or under 30?
Under 30, max 29.
Maxed. And will you be maxing that every week?
Yes.
Okay. And then will they be trained in like early literacy, science of reading? Ideally, if you can fill that position and look for someone to fill that gap between early reading that our staff has said that I think that they would like someone in that spot to help with.
So it's
And I
not
heard that-
necessarily,
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
it's not necessarily early reading that is the issue. The issue is secondary teachers aren't trained in teaching how to read, because in theory, you want kids to be able to read by 3rd grade, which means by 6th grade, you should kind of be reading fluently, right?
Right.
So they don't necessarily have to be trained in early, but ideally the post would, I'm from a hiring perspective, would probably be looking at someone who is reading certified, reading.
In science of reading.
No,
Okay.
Mhm.
And wait, there was one more question I had on that. Oh, and then we also have co-teachers, is that right? For some kiddos with EL or English as a second language. Is that correct?
We have ESOL teachers, yes.
And those are we do that in a co-taught model, is that right?
We use COTOP and resource.
And where do those people fall on this budget?
They're earned and staffed.
Oh, I just meant like what line item? What are they potentially called, I guess?
They would fall.
Is this the other item we added to our strategic plan? And I know
Well, they are funded, because they're funded by the state. Diane, you might need to help me out with that one. Because I don't know how they redid this view. They may be under school support.
These are special ed co-teachers or just any
No,
co-teacher?
ESOL teachers.
I don't know. I'll be honest, I don't know how ESOL teachers are. Let me see. ESOL teachers are earned.
Right, by the number of
Positions.
people that you have, but
Mhm.
that's what I said, it's already there.
So just to
I
review the
remember which
definition,
category it goes under. That's what she's asking.
it would be under the special ed
Okay.
in terms of the earned teachers. So they're part of that, part of the earned under special ed. So in that special ed, you have the ESOL, interrelated, special ed teachers, orthopedic impairment, deaf, hard of hearing, autism, your speech pathologist, if you earned one, was there, adaptive PE, all of that is under special ed.
I found it in
Yeah.
the last presentation.
It's still here. It's just seen differently.
Okay. I found the slide. Thank you. So it looks like we have two, or according to the last presentation. Okay.
All right. So now I am going to do the breakout categories, and this just gives you definition of what the columns represent. So looking at the school strategic plan, looking at the ranked priorities and looking at the school strategies, that's how we're going to put the priorities, what specific objective I'm trying to reach for, the ask, and how much it costs. So, and I just used all things for the most part. The first line is just about making sure we have administration, which includes clerks, school business manager, registrar, all of those things. That is about 1.2 mil. Having wraparound services, which is your nurse, counselors, 504, SST specialists, those are maintaining what we've had so far. That is 1.17 million. Making sure we have the same level to ensure that the class sizes are not above 26 for the most part. There are some exceptions, but not many. This is also adding that STEAM science teacher in here because they're funded through STEAM, but it's just a science teacher. Just wanted to clarify that they will not be teaching STEAM things. Well, science teaches STEM things, but they're going to be teaching one of the grade level core standards, right? Just want to make sure I'm clear. But that ends up being 6.3 million. Our connections classes, even with the 0.5 reduction, we're looking at 4.2 million. Our special ed and ESOL, if we would just flip one page, we would have gotten that answer, Ms. Eldery. So that's 2.9 million. And media specialist and supplies is 165,000. Software, we coordinate with most of our software funding needs with a parent organization. So the school just does one large purchase. I'm trying to see if the district will absorb that, but for right now, it's 25,000. Instructional supplies, and based on the email I received today, will include printer ink for all 30 printers that we have in the building. We're at 82,000. Oh, I'm sorry, I misspoke. So increasing that science teacher, I did it as a separate line item. The master teacher leader increase and the reading teacher, which addresses literacy, 170,000. The wraparound services for security and safety, we're looking at 323,000. So this breaks down per FTE, per pupil spending in this way. And 82% of the budget is spent on teachers and instruction. So I think we're open to discussion at this point, and I can go back to any slide that we want to, but I wanted to say all of those things before we started thinking about, do you feel that this budget supports the strategic priorities and all of the other things I discussed, the trade-offs involved throughout the presentation. So open to discussion.
So Principal Hollis, I just want to clarify, so the half art teacher and with the current art teacher and the current aide position that got removed, are those removed completely?
Yes,
Okay.
from a full-time perspective, yes.
And I just want to say that I know over the years, I've heard that the art class, I know my eldest daughter wasn't able to ever get into it. It was greatly appreciated. And I know a lot of kids really enjoyed the art program. And that is unfortunate. I personally think I would like a conversation to fold other people into this conversation to
Can we pause on that though? I didn't
advocate.
say I was removing all arts classes. So what I'm not doing is having the person here every day. So all of the art offerings that are here would still be here. I just want to clarify that. You can continue with what you had to say. I just wanted to clarify because I think that we're missing.
So the
what-
same courses are there, just not as many sections of the course?
Correct.
Okay, so that still limits the amount of kids that can take the courses. It doesn't limit the offerings. It still limits how many bodies you can get into those classes because there's less courses, correct?
Correct. And we're being strategic around that management aspect of it to choose a space where it is not as efficiently filled as others.
I mean, I get it. These are hard choices, and I mean, but arts are so important to kids and their creativity and their growth. I get it, though. I know they're hard choices. I'm gonna just take a hot minute to just
I
remind you.
understand that. I do. And so when it says the trade-offs, would you like me not to have the possibly 1.5 reading, or intervention?
No, like I know, no,
I'm just trying
I know.
I think what most people are feeling is that our budget is so tight that I know personally, I want to advocate to the next level that we need a little bit more breathing room here. There was a raise increase for staff and our budget did not increase as much as it should to absorb that, and being a non-title school and our parents in our community continuing to help with resources, we are in a different position. I think that's, Shalonda, I think that you're not advocating to switch out something. I think, and I am not either. I'm hoping to advocate to say this, we need more breathing room here for our community and our needs.
Mhm.
For the staff to not feel like they're scrambling around and not being supported. And when you don't have subs in the room, I know what that looked like 2 weeks ago. Had a daughter with a teacher out for 6 days, and having them learn from a computer is not the answer. And so it's just not. I think what I'm personally asking for is that we fold more administrators into this conversation and help you advocate for the needs of our school to support the teachers and the students and the environment that is.
I mean, in full transparency, you haven't said anything that I haven't already argued.
We're looking to support you, and I think that
But I think that we need to be careful in the space of the vote is for, given the amount that I have I utilized those funds in order to meet the strategic plan? And if we want to advocate in addition to that, I am all for it. I've lifted I've lifted all of the concerns that you explicitly listed, especially when we look at this per pupil amount that we have, which is, I know that was a budget mission piece that was kept coming up. We have one of the lowest per pupil funding for schools. So I have lifted all those things. I just don't want us to say or vote no, which signifies that I have not utilized the budget
No.
that's given right now.
I don't think
to
that's what
match
the vote is.
The priorities versus voting for what I have now and advocating for more, based on the things that have been lifted.
I didn't think the vote was on you doing your job or not. Diane, could maybe you give us some insight on that? From my understanding, we're voting that we approve this draft of a budget or not. And I think I'm not okay with this draft of a budget because we want some more. So I don't want my vote to be taken out of context, but my vote has nothing to do with Principal Hollis doing her job.
So I have a challenge with that because advocating for more, that this is not the proper venue to advocate for more, right? Principal Hollis has no control over how much she's been allocated. That is a board member and superintendent question.
Right.
And I understand and hear your frustration. And I know that you realize that there's this $100 million budget gap. The question on the table for this draft budget is, with what she has been allocated, has she taken what she has been allocated and applied it to the priorities that you as a Go team have identified for your school? And then what's going to happen? Again, this is still in a draft mode. Please realize that this is still in draft mode, because then what happens after you all come to consensus on a draft budget, she will take it to her cluster superintendent and she will take it to a staffing conference. Both the cluster superintendent and both at the Human Resources Staffing Conference, they can make changes to this budget at that time, but you all will get a final vote of approval of the recommendation in March, right? So it would be one thing to advocate for more if Principal Hollis had any influence or control to that point, but Principal Hollis does not. She can't. There's no more money. If you feel that schools should have more money allocated to them. That is a conversation to have with your board member and the superintendent. Holding up, potentially holding up Howard's budget for something that is outside of the principal's control, I don't see that it's going to benefit your students. That's my personal opinion. Now, if you advocate to the board and the superintendent and more funds are allocated to the schools, then that would have to come back to the GO team for a vote on how to spend them potentially. So
what
So-
clearly are we voting on tonight? You're saying to approve a draft of a budget, but this is not the signature programming budget that our GO team put together. It was manipulated by someone outside and then brought back to us and told the zero-based budgeting is now what we have to vote on, when this is not what the previous GO team meeting suggested for the signature programming zero-based budgeting. So we do have flexibility with that.
So at the previous meeting with the zero-based budgeting, please remember that that was a request for funds. That was not, there was never a guarantee that everything requested would be allocated to the schools.
Correct.
They were trying, the central office was trying to see where they wanted schools to examine their signature programs and determine where funds were really needed to support these signature programs. Okay. Again, we're in a budget shortfall. This is the money that the superintendent and finance have allocated to the schools. What you are voting on today, to repeat, is based upon what Principal Hollis and DT Howard have been allocated. Do you feel that the allocations that have been given to Howard Middle School are being spent in alignment with the priorities that you have identified?
And it's not ready for vote yet. I do have to tell how we would use the reserves, but I want to
Yeah.
up the discussion for the base budget.
So,
And I went back to the whole what, when, why thing in case that helped clarify any questions.
no, I mean, I get it, and I think that's the hard part as principal, right? Like you have to make the most difficult decisions about how to try to align whatever you're allocated to what we have said strategically we want to do. But Ms. Eldery pointed out, which I pointed out to all of my district people last year when they voted on it, that, raises were given, but there was no budget increase at that time to match the raises. But so we look at our budget and it's people in our budget. It's the majority of our budget is for the folks that are in the building, and that's important. It's hugely important. And teachers must be funded and they've got to get what they need, but they also need the resources. They also need the training. They also need the support staff. They also need the things like art programming, so that the kids can have they can love coming to school. Y'all will never believe that the thing that my 8th grader has been most excited about all year long is going to Fiesta Plaza to practice her Spanish and get something to eat. It's the simplest thing. But we're talking about, like, we're gonna have to figure out how to fund field trips. And there's a $16.8 billion surplus in the state of Georgia.
Well,
it's very frustrating.
I just want to say that Diane, I understand what you're saying, but we are one of the highest enrolled schools and we have some of the lowest funding. So I do hear what you're saying, but we are one of those schools that get less funding and our community has supported to fill gaps. So there can be circumstances where, we need to have a conversation more.
Well, it sounds like the conversation we need to have as parents, and for all of the folks listening, it sounds like we need to contact the superintendent and our district representative. Like, this is not, Principal Hollis can't solve this for us.
No, she can't. That's why I said I think we invite a cluster superintendent, Sophianos and Dr. Johnson and Ken Zeff, and Katie Howard is our board member of our school where the school sits, and our at-large members, and have a conversation with them prior to voting on the budget. And we have the timeline for that. And we have, the community is asking, I know at least me, to do that. So to advocate.
And I think that, yes, we should advocate for more, but right now our task is to determine whether the budget she has put forth to us tonight aligns with our plan. That's our job right now. And if we do more outside of that, great. I think we should, but I think we're veering like hard to the left right now. We have one task in mind right now, and that's, did she come up with a budget that aligns with our strategic plan?
I don't think she has the ability to do that because we don't have enough money, is what I'm saying. So I put forward what we can, I don't know if we need to move on, but I'm just telling you all that that is going to be my ask. And I don't think she has the resources to align with our strategic plan to support the teachers in the building and to support the students. So that is my, I guess, final comment.
And
I have a question. I'm
okay,
sorry.
go ahead.
So if we, and this is a Diane question, if the Go Team, or we're not even gonna talk in terms of David T. Howard's Go Team, because we're not gonna stress me out. Because Ms. O'Leary has mentioned that other Go Teams did not vote in favor of their proposed budget. If I go back to the timeline and staffing conferences, which those approvals allow me to post positions so I can start hiring as soon as hiring is allowed, how does that impact those next steps?
So first off, between yesterday and today, I do not know of a single team that has voted down the draft.
That doesn't mean we need to do.
No,
Let's
you don't,
be
but
clear, what you're saying right now.
okay, so
Ms. O'Leary,
wait.
when
Let me,
someone else
Dion,
has the
please,
floor,
let me,
yeah, let her finish.
please. So a couple of things. One, this is a democratic process, right? The whole team can vote. Ms. Eldery, if you do not want to vote in support of this draft budget, you do not have to. However, the vote on this budget is not a vote on how much were we allocated. The vote is on how are we spending what we were allocated. So to that point, in terms of the process is that when we look at governance, the goal is for this team to reach consensus on how the allocation is being spent. How you got the allocation, that is you always want to address the body responsible for the decision making, right? Principal Hollis is not responsible for how the funds were allocated to her. She received them. So the goal hopefully in this meeting is for this team to reach a consensus on how you are spending the money. If you do not when you reach that consensus, whether it's today or later this week, and the team finds a consensus on the spending, then you are able to tell effectively what you're telling Principal Hollis is, this is the budget. This is the spending that we think will support our strategic priorities. This is the spending with what we've been allocated that we can support. And you are effectively giving Principal Hollis basically her marching orders that when she goes to her cluster superintendent and when she goes to the HR staffing conference, that you want her to advocate for this budget for your school. So that being said, if for some reason you guys decide that you need 5 beach volleyball coaches and you are completely adamant that 5 beach volleyball coaches is going to move the needle for your kids in math, then the expectation is is that when Principal Hollis gets to her cluster superintendent, she can defend that decision of, we have 5 beach volleyball coaches because our data showed this, our discussions had this, and this is how we came to this. That's what you spent fall semester doing by reviewing your data, talking about your strategic plan, and ranking those priorities. So that keeps the process moving, so that after the cluster superintendent review and after the HR staffing conference, hopefully there are no additional changes, so that when it comes back to you in March, you all can then make that final vote. If there happen to be changes between step 6 and step 7, then when you come back in March, you can focus in on just those changes and again talk about how you are supporting your strategic priorities and the goals that you all have laid out. Is that?
So if we don't vote this up today, it delays our processing time and Principal Hollis's ability to move forward with staffing and figuring out the on the ground details of things.
Potentially. The other potential is that it could also take away the school level flexibility, meaning that what the district funds is what y'all get. And that I will point out that that is how most other districts staff buildings, that they just say, here's the people that you have no flexibility. So this
So
is
you're
this is
saying
school
that
level flexibility.
if we don't vote
So
this down,
Derry, can she finish her statement first, please?
I thought she was done. I'm
Yeah,
sorry, there's a delay.
Go ahead.
So you're saying if we, which we haven't taken a vote,
No, you
so,
haven't.
so let's not assume anything here. But you're saying if we don't vote this down, approve, Howard Middle School could lose its flexibility. That's what you're saying? According to the charter, we could lose its flexibility in funding. So that's what Lisa Bracken and the superintendent has said. If a school doesn't, in this process, the GO team decides to not support something, they're going to take away the flexibility of funding.
I will be honest with you, in the 7 years that I have been here, even though it's been, we have had some very extended conversations at some schools, we have yet to have a school that could not come to consensus on their budget. So.
But we're not at the end period. We're not at the end period. I just asked you a question to clarify. You said we would potentially lose our flexibility in funding if we don't vote this draft. Is that what you said?
Not this draft. If the GO team cannot come to consensus on a draft, not a draft. If the GO team cannot come to consensus on the final budget, that is a potential. You are not doing that. You are not doing that today. You are voting on a draft today. If the GO team cannot come to consensus on a final budget, that is a potential outcome of not coming to consensus, because with the charter system, this is not where one person necessarily gets to make all of these flexibility decisions, right? Which is why in that final vote, we want the GO team to come to consensus on a budget, not necessarily this one, whatever. But if the GO team as a governing body cannot come to consensus, then that means that a budget still has to be drawn up for the school. So how do you do that? One way to do that is to default to what state law already is and no flexibility. That's one way to do that. I don't know what Lisa Bracken and the new superintendent would decide to do. I just want this team to be aware of what some of the potential things could happen if the team doesn't come to consensus on the budget at the end of the line.
By March
step
14th. By March 14th.
Correct. By March 14th.
Not today's vote, by March 14th.
The hope is that today's vote will give you a budget that can go through the cluster superintendent review and the staffing review and not be changed. However, the finance has said that budgets become locked on the 28th, but that doesn't mean that if something happens that when it comes back on the afterwards, that some other minor changes could be made. So I've seen I've seen budgets after staffing conferences come back to Go teams, and they have to unlock it for the Go team in the school because they did not agree with what happened at staffing conference and superintendent reviews. So again, we've been doing this for 7 years. We're here to help.
My question was more so based on the fact that this is a new process for us to vote at this point. Normally, we vote at the end, so I was trying to see the impact that this vote makes if known at this time.
So at this time, if the Go team this week cannot come to consensus on this budget, I honestly don't know. That's something that we would have to talk about with our team and cluster superintendents.
Okay,
But it could potentially slow things down.
okay. So while you all are mulling over that information, I'm going to finish these last 2 slides so that we can get to the vote. So we have on reserve, hold back $208,044. That means that if we do not get the number of students enrolled at the point in time that they pull the numbers, we have to have a plan for what we're going to do. And if we do hit the numbers, which we have since I've been here, we've hit the numbers both years. Then what can we do with the monies that we get on, back and then on top of that? So these are ways for us to get the field trips back in. So the students go on a field trip per grade level, both the last 2 years. And so the first year, the school funded it. The second year, this year, parents funded it. So this is trying to get us back to the school funding those field trips. And so you'll see that field trip line and transportation line. As we're continuing to adopt new standards from the state, we don't really know what kind of professional development that might be needed around that. So adding more money to that capacity. Again, we don't know what this printer situation is going to be like, to be quite frank. I don't even remember the last time a school bought ink. So that is a new space that we're going to, and even with the changes as far as decreasing number of staff members, increasing the number of staff members overall, we have an increase in the number of staff members that we're trying to fund for. So that will be another space we would need materials and supplies. Again, our focus is around making sure, like Ms. Eldery said, during cold and flu season, people getting sick when they wake up in the morning and not getting us up to cover. So we already had one in the main approved part of the budget, but this will give us a second person here to cover so we can at least get almost back to whole again, max 29 hours. So we'll be very strategic with how we time their arrival and departure. Because we don't have any permanent subs scheduled to come to us. And that means every teacher absence will be funded by the school. So I'm not sure, honestly, if the 150 that they put aside, especially as Ms. Miller pointed out, that the cost has increased for everything because substitutes got raises as well. Not sure if you all knew that. So subs cost more. So making sure we can cover that and I won't have a negative balance in that line in case there is any other educational software, because again, we haven't adopted these standards yet. We haven't implemented them. We don't know what the curricular resources will be. We don't know anything because we haven't adopted the curriculum. So I wanted to give some space for that. Then we were just thinking from a STEAM, utilizing our outdoor space in a different way. So that's what the bottom 2 lines are about. So in the event that we do have the enrollment we need, and I am able to have access to these funds, these are ways. Now, let me also say, what you notice is not any FTE of teachers. These funds are not released until Labor Day. If you recall, our cadence this year, it was like September when we talked about the holdback coming back and this is what I plan to do. Do you approve? Remember that? It was around September, which means I have to get the funds. We have to have the meeting. Then I can post a position. Then we vet and hire. If you get my drift, that will mean the person will come into October, and I just do not like to lead from a place of disruption and chaos. And shifting classes around in October for a potential teacher, I think that's more chaotic. It does more bad than good. But that is my philosophy. That's why you don't see it here.
I'm sorry, may I ask a question that's a point of clarification that I think I was unclear on earlier, maybe? The teacher tutor, is that person more of a replacement for the permanent sub, or is that person doing intervention work?
The hourly reading teacher is doing intervention work. The teacher
Okay,
is a replacement for the permanent sub with the added bonus. They're certified.
yes, sir.
So in the event that all 127 people are in the building, then maybe they can serve in the capacity of helping do some pullouts, help with small groups or whatever. But you and I both know during cold and flu season, that is not the case. So their first priority is as a certified teacher, hopefully a retired teacher that wants to move around during the day, they would be able to come into those spaces and actually, as Ms. Eldery pointed out, do a little instruction.
Mhm. Okay.
Thank you, Principal Hollis. I think based on what you have been allocated, and what we set as our priorities, this is as in line as we can possibly get. I know we did have some concerns about remediation. It seems like you've got a plan for trying to get closer back to those two full-time folks focused on that. These are hard choices. These are hard things. But I know you've done, in my opinion, you have done well with what you have been resourced with. And I will take you up, Ms. Eldery, on figuring out a plan for us to go and do some advocating offline with some of these decision makers, and I am in. Any other comments or feedback? All right. Hearing none, it is my understanding that the desire is for us to vote on the draft budget as presented. Am I understanding that right? Okay. All right. I will
Did you, oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
You showed the slides with the questions for discussion for the Go team?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
We are very quiet today. We're a very quiet bunch. Other than me and Miss Eldery. I don't think we are ever quiet. All right. I will entertain a motion to approve the draft budget, understanding this is not the final budget, and understanding that there will be an opportunity between now and our next meeting offline. I don't know if we can all do it as a group because then we have a quorum and there are rules about that. But I can take the lead if being the contact person, if somebody wants to join in our advocacy efforts, to be the contact person for you to contact me, and we can figure out how to use you. But understanding this is not the final budget, I will take a motion to approve the draft budget as presented with the understanding that Principal Hollis has allocated what she has been given to what we have outlined as our strategic priorities.
I motion to approve.
Second, I hear a second.
I'll second.
All right, Ms. Moore and Mr. Anglin, all those in favor? All those opposed? All right, it looks like we have one opposition. All right, moving on to our information items. We have the principal's report. Principal Hollis, do you have something for us? Or do you want us to go and let Ms. Johnson do her personal electronic devices presentation first? Because she's been waiting patiently. Thank you, Ms. Johnson, for joining us. Is that okay, Principal Hollis?
Sure.
All right, Ms. Ward, Johnson, Ms. Johnson.
Thank you. It's really healthy, I think, for all of us to see the work that goes into all of this. So thank you guys. My name is Haley. I don't have any slides. I was just going to talk to you guys, and I'd love to hear your thoughts about this. I'm a mom of 3. I have 2 girls at Virginia Highland Elementary. I have a 2-year-old son, so we will be here for a long time. And I just wanted to thank you guys for all the work that you're doing. I know it's hard when parents come in with these comments, but I wanted to just say that we are noticing all the positive change at Howard. Elementary school parents are watching, and we are excited to send our kids to Howard next year. I know that my letter was read at the last meeting, so I really just wanted to focus on next steps. I've spoken to a lot of community members. I've emailed Principal Hollis. I went to the roundtable last night. I've spoken with Ben Nemo, who talked at the beginning of the meeting. I understand that pouches are likely not necessary for Howard right now due to the level of investment, both financially and staffing wise. I think part of that is because more and more families are delaying the introduction of phones for their kids. We're seeing more and more of that. We have another no phone pledge going around shortly, which is a great thing. But what is happening is that parents are giving their kids smart watches, and that is to, keep track of them as they walk and bike to school. So it's my understanding right now that the Away for the Day policy does not include smartwatches. And I think that that's a major oversight. So we can come back to that later. I don't want to jump to specific solutions right now. But what I do want to ask for tonight is a teacher survey, a teacher and staff survey, just to check in on a couple of things with the current policy. One being, are students indeed using devices, phones, watches, earbuds during school hours? Is the current policy being enforced consistently across the board with all teachers and staff? And how much stress are teachers taking on with the current enforcement protocol? Again, I think the Away for the Day policy is a great foundation, but I would just encourage us to look at what our counterparts are doing, not just what Midtown is doing. I know that that's a different situation, but I know that today all Marietta Middle Schools are doing pouches. Ben Nemo talked about Sutton Middle School and what they're doing, how they've rolled out a little bit more of a robust device policy that does include smartwatches. So that's what I want, is just openness to the conversation. I think there is an appetite for this conversation among parents. I don't know if this was included in my last letter, but as I've just started talking about this with other community members, over 45 families have pledged up to $10,000 should, it be decided that we want to do pouches. Again, I'm not saying that's what's necessary now, but there is an appetite for this conversation in the community. So I know it's a big conversation. You guys obviously are dealing with really big things. But I don't think it's fair to just say this is not a problem at Howard. I think we do need some data to back that up to parents. So thank you again. That's what I wanted to share, and I'm happy to take questions.
Ms. Johnson, are you proposing that the parents, the group of parents will put together the survey for the teachers?
Yes, actually, what I forgot to mention is that I'm happy to form a device committee. There are a couple of other parents that reached out to me proactively, and they are really excited about this. And I know that there's a lot of device conversations, not just students' personal devices, but the use of devices in the curriculum, teacher device policies and things like that. But yes, I do have the Midtown survey that they used. I think it needs to be revised to suit our community. And I'd be happy to help any way I can.
I would just add that the feedback is also students and parents should get a survey. We haven't really been surveyed at Midtown, and that is actually hitting the Go team this last month. So any survey you're doing about this, I would be proactive in adding both a student and community member survey, whether it be parents or grandparents or the adults at home, not just staff. Because this, if you're going to do something.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that can be done.
Anyone else?
I think that I do want to go on record as saying that we didn't say that watches and AirPods and headphones are not included as a part of our Away for the Day. If you looked at the flyer that I shared during what you were saying, those things are included in our meeting with the students. We communicate to the students, and the teachers can verify what I'm saying. We do tell them that the watches should be in watch mode only, meaning not able to text and communicate with outside people. From that perspective, from the watches, when we do our town halls, I think that it's a misnomer to believe that because we're not buying a locker or buying a pouch, that we're not advocating for devices not to be used. We do keep track of the data with infractions, love notices, and Infinite Campus infractions if it goes beyond the veil. And what we have tracked is that we've hit less infractions since we've started this program a couple of years ago. And we barely have any infractions, especially, I think it varies per grade level, but that's not where we spend our time. So I think it's a misnomer to believe that we don't keep data or that we are not being inclusive of other devices besides just a physical cell phone. And so I just wanted to go on record saying that.
Thank you, Principal Hollis. I don't know that I was clear that the watches were a part of it as well. So thank you for that clarification.
Can I add one thing, Ms. Miller? Is that?
Of course, absolutely.
Okay. I have a student at Midtown and a student at Howard, and I would frankly say I think that the policies are equally effective in both schools. What I like about the Howard policy is that I this is just anecdotal, right? This is my kid, but I think it's teaching some self-discipline, which is, I think, a really valuable thing. And Ms. Johnson, I'm sort of Switzerland on the pouches, but I would do some real digging into their effectiveness. And I mean that in a sub rosa way. Just from what I'm hearing from my junior, I'm not saying he's doing anything, but the first thing when these Yonder pouches came out, the first thing that was on YouTube was how to get them open. And I'm not, again, I'm not saying, it is a big expense. Maybe it's worth it. Maybe it's not a panacea.
Yeah, I think we don't have to discuss pouches at this time. I think we're all in agreement there. But I am happy to hear that, Principal Hollis, about the watches. I know at the parent roundtable last night, someone asked explicitly if watches were included in the policy, and the answer was no. And I've heard from other parents that their kids are wearing watches. I think the concern is that even if it is in school mode, with certain types of devices, kids can exit out of that at any time on their own. So I think I would just be curious to understand if watches are presenting as much of a distraction as it might seem like they would.
Well, it sounds like the data doesn't support that, but I mean,
Ms. Nolan and Mr. England want to speak, but I will say this. I think that you can get from a management perspective and then to dive into a deep hole. And when we're policing, do you have something on your arm? Is this a smartwatch? And the changes that occur very frequently. We used to be able to say every year. Now we can say in a shorter span of what is a smartwatch and what's not. I just don't know that I want to dive into the management of that. I am definitely open to having conversations with families and with students, as we already do, around that. But that concerns me to get into that level of management, if that makes sense. But I'll let the teachers speak.
I teach 7th grade, and I will say I think smartwatches are a huge problem. And it's not because we don't have a good policy, and we do. It is because we have kids who, despite the fact that they are trying to learn self-restraint, it is very hard with a teenage brain to do that. And they do have it in the off mode, and they will switch it, and they'll ask to go to the restroom. And so I do think that's a problem. I don't think pouches are necessarily the solution either. I have a high schooler there. It has pros and cons. However, I do think that it's probably worth a discussion, and it is probably worth engaging the whole community to see. And because I would say from a teacher perspective that part of the problem is parents, and I mean that in the nicest way possible, but one of the reasons kids wear watches is because their mom or dad wants to tell them, like, oh, I changed the transportation on the way home. And when I go to a kid and say, hey, stop, and I see, they're like working, and then they go like this. So I can see it, right? And I'm like, hey, that's, out. This is not now. Like, take it off. And it's my mom. And I'm like, I don't care. 1 iota. Like, school day, take it off. That's my mom, Miss Nolan. I have to know how to get home. And so one of the things that is difficult for us, I think, as a school community is also communicating that back to parents. That's why I love, Ms. Johnson, what you said about also trying to delay device introduction. Like flip phones, awesome. That's my poor child who's about to be a 6th grader at Howard next year. She will have a flip phone until she's like 18, I think. But because it is really, really hard, and we need as a community to be united on that problem. Otherwise it leaves the teachers in police mode and is really hard. I mean, it is not most students offending it, but it's like they can't help it. And we are putting on their wrist one of the most distracting devices and then hoping that they can figure out how to not be distracted by it. I mean, adults can't do it either. So just mine.
I would like to add to your statement. So is that, and when we're talking about behaviors that are aligned with not being able to resist distractions, if you get rid of the smartwatches, then what's next that we're gonna get rid of? So it does go down this rabbit hole too. My child doesn't have either. So I don't know, we're talking about personal things. But I will say this, with her not having either, she figures out a way to chat on the device. I mean, so I don't know that we're solving the ultimate problem, but it's definitely open for a conversation. Like I said before, Mr. England, I know you wanted to speak as well.
So I do 6th grade, and apparently that's the year that everybody comes in with Beats and watches and all the new fangled stuff that I can't afford, which is awesome. But I think it really comes down to a big teachable moment with the watches. I tell them, if you are staring at your watch like you're staring at your phone, then you're using it as a phone. So it's time to go ahead and take off the watch. And with 6th graders, that usually clicks in with them because they don't understand that it can be qualified as both. So being able to dive in, like, hey, if you're using it like you would your phone, then you are using a phone and you're not using a watch. And that kind of helps them realize that, oh, yeah, I should go back to what I'm doing. But even with 6th grade, it's not device-wise. I would say with my interaction, it's not really a big issue.
I have a teacher who is watching on YouTube that has chimed in through my phone, so I'll use this as a public comment moment. It is an 8th grade teacher, since we have currently a 6th and a 7th grade teacher here. And she said that we hardly ever have to deal with any devices. The bigger issue was the phone, but students have become accustomed to the policy, and that's just her experience.
May I ask a question? You have been with us, Principal Haas, for what, 2 years now? But 1 year as a principal, 1 full year, and then this year?
This is going into my 3rd year. I started, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So since you implemented this, maybe it would be a good time to get feedback from the community. I know you made some adjustments last year, which we greatly appreciate, adding the earbuds and some things. I dropped the board policy, and meaning the APS board policy, which is approved, and the superintendent regulation in the chat, which we can add to the notes for people to look at. But it might be a good time to get feedback from the community on how it's working, teachers, staff, parents and kids. So I like that from all aspects. Then the other thing I was going to say is I don't remember if it was Sudi or somebody else point where they said they'll find the workarounds. So Haley, what they're currently doing is if they don't have a watch, they make a shared Google form and they chat on that. And then they also figured out how to use school messenger, and they send emails to each other constantly. Hi, 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 hi. So I don't want to discredit what you're saying and the concerns that you're bringing. It's that they are always 3 steps ahead of us. So I do think that we need to partner all together and figure out what's best. To Doug's point, I have a 6th, an 8th, and a 10th grader. And I like that we're continuing to have this conversation and hope it continues, and love a survey to all to see how we can help further support. I was wondering about the incident data. Are the teachers really able to follow through with the discipline measures when these things are found? I guess that was my question. Are they able to, do they have the time to write are the consequences happening? I guess that's my question.
So to answer your question, we do get feedback from teachers, administration. We have problem-solving meetings at the end of every year to kind of figure out, and actually mid-year, to figure out what course corrections do we need to do. So one thing that we changed this year is doing level 1 notices, level 1 infraction violation notices for all grade levels. We've always done it for 8th. So we added 6th and 7th. So it's a little easier to give us that information about there's someone using the cell phone that is not a typical violator, and it doesn't go in Infinite Campus in that such a way, but it does restrict them from certain activities or access to certain things if they get too many of them, right? So not just saying it must go straight to code of conduct, but if you have 3 of these, can we give you a silent lunch? You know, take away your recess or something like that. That's not, you know, that's an alternative, right? But yes, parents are contacted. Yes, if we're told as administrators, we do get on it. And then they can speak to whether or not they feel like administration is following through. Y'all are scared to say it because I'm online.
I just
And
wanted
Linda,
to ask,
like, Dr. Bryant, do you feel like administration follows through when you tell them about a cell phone violation?
Since I've been here, I think that policy has definitely helped because we had a problem long time ago, but we don't have the problems like we used to. And I think that what we're doing now has been very effective. I don't have any problems with phones, earbuds, nor do I have problems with smartwatches in my class because my kids know. And I have something in my classroom if that does occur, but I never really had to use it because we go over the rules and what is expected of them in a classroom setting. So that's what my experience has been.
Just to be clear, I think administration follows through too. I mean, I deliver about 10 phones a day to Dr. Owens. So, but I do end up collecting like 10 phones a day in the hallway or in the cafeteria. It's not in my class. That's rare, but it is there out in the school day.
But I must say administration does handle any infraction.
And Ms. Nolan, I'll take that, you know, because we're 1,100 to 120. So in the cafeteria and in the hallway, you know, they outnumber us. So, you know, but I will say even our students who tend to have more challenging behaviors, right? Because they've been here at least 2 years of implementation. If we say, you know, you weren't supposed to have that cell phone out, you know, you weren't supposed to be, and they're like, yeah, you're right. You're right. I wasn't supposed to be doing that. So, you know, if anything, at least there's ownership and responsibility and, you know, in that space where coming from Midtown Grady High School, I promise you back in the day, that is not, that would not have been that conversation. So I think that collective as a whole, as a secondary cluster effort, students are starting to understand what we are preaching to them as adults. And I will also give this shout out to my 8th graders that went over to Midtown for their tour. When they talked to them about the pouches, they cheered. So they're not as resistant to those ideas as they once were.
And the thing is, Mrs. Hollis, the thing is, and for others, it's not as bad as one would think. You know, because our kids really know what the responsibility is and what we do in our classes. And I think that a lot of us really reinforce cell phone policies and things of this nature. So it's not as bad as it used to be, even when we were at Inman. This is a great improvement because they will pull out a phone in a minute and parents will call them on their phones. So this is a wonderful improvement. So that's my take.
So is it something that I think Ms. Johnson, you asked potentially for a committee and also potentially for a survey? Is it something, Principal Hollis, that is this an ask of the Go team, or is this something that you want to, I don't know what roundtable you're talking about, Ms. Johnson. But is this something that you want to partner with a group of community members / parent leaders and create like just a, hey, we've done this for a year, 2 years, how we doing? Is there anything we need to know? Is there anything that we're not hitting on this point?
The roundtable was for Rising Rams. So
Okay.
5th grade.
I didn't know if it was on the devices or what it was.
No, it was just it was a parent conversation, parent to parent. So oftentimes we talk from school-based administration, staffs, teachers,
Yeah.
and this was an opportunity for parents to share what that experience is, shifting from elementary spaces to secondary spaces.
I've been a part of that before, but is this something the ask was potentially surveying and a committee? So how do we want to, Ms. Miller, how do we want to proceed with that? Or how do we want to,
Well, I think, Ms. Johnson, I mean, if the community wants to put together a survey and distribute a survey, I don't think there'd be any objection to receiving the data that comes out of that.
But the survey would need to be distributed by administration to the teachers and staff, right?
Is that necessarily correct, Principal Hollis? Like we have their email addresses. I mean,
It's
Oh,
easy
okay.
to go through.
and their email addresses are
Easier to go
public.
from, but not necessarily administration. It's just easier to go for, it can be a Go Team staff representative sending it. It doesn't matter to me. It's however you all want to proceed.
I think a partnership would be good. Something that, Principal Hollis, you were comfortable with sending out. It asked some questions or hit some points that the school wanted feedback on. Ms. Johnson and maybe the Go Team members can look at it, see if they have any feedback before you give it. And if you're willing to do that, that would be great. If we're talking about students as well, getting feedback on that, we would need your help with that, Principal Hollis. I know a short, very short, quick, maybe free cookie involved with that survey too.
I
Do
say
it.
on
Maybe
student,
something they can do an advisory really quick.
yeah, I don't really know that because of some things we're about to roll out, getting ready for milestones and MAT testing, if it would be better suited towards May, not that we can't get it. But then at that point, we would have had 2 years of full implementation, so.
Ms. Johnson, does that sound good?
Let's see. Yes, that sounds good. I do wonder if we need 2 different surveys, one for parents and one for staff. So I'll be happy to work on those drafts and get those to you. Who should I send it to? Ms. Miller or Ms. Hollis?
I mean, I'm
Hey,
happy.
I was just gonna, I'm sorry,
Ms. Patel.
Haley too. Is it worth forming a committee though to make sure it's ongoing? And that, because you don't want to come up with this all alone, right? You want input and all of that, but then also after you receive the data, I guess next steps and all that, or do we just do that through the Go Team?
Well, I mean, so there are a couple of things, right? I think first let's identify whether or not we have an issue, and then use the data to determine what the next steps might be, right? And I mean, we can present it to the Go Team, we can present it to the school community, because there might be a perception that in reality doesn't exist. So maybe let's get the information, present it to all of our stakeholders, and then see what might be some appropriate next steps. I am hesitant to commit the Go Team to doing anything because, you know, we have other constraints with regard to time, resources, and staffing. So I don't want to add things that then we can't figure out. But if we are looking at data and we get it May, we can start evaluating it and figure out what, if any, issues and how we might resolve those, and maybe put a committee together at that time to work through those things.
Yeah, that sounds great. And I'm happy to, carry the burden of drafting the survey.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson.
And I think you can, once you have a draft, you can send it to all the Go Team members and the school, and we can give input.
Sure. Thank you. And thank you guys for being open to this conversation.
No, thank you for your time. We appreciate you and your interest, and we look forward to having you.
We're excited to be there. I promise I'm not just
Welcome to
going
the
to come in and
Rams
complain.
Welcome to the Rams family.
When I get there, I will be helpful. I will volunteer. I will not just complain about things.
Yeah, no, and I'll speak for Haley. She literally lives at Virginia Highland Elementary. Anytime I go in to volunteer, she is there already doing everything. So she will be a great asset to Howard.
Well,
So,
thank you.
so is Hina.
No, okay.
All right, and we are actually at our 6:30 limit, but we have, I think we still have the principal's report and the CAT representative report. So can we make those super quick?
Sure, I just saw y'all a week or so ago and nothing's changed. No, I'm just kidding. Robotics team placed third in the state competition, so that's great.
In their first one ever. That's so
Yeah,
dope.
so the first one for Howard, they
For
did have
Howard.
robotics at Inman. I don't want to make, anyone upset about that. We're talking about, the science fair results, there should be, from the Metro Fair, that will be Thursday. And then, the, technology fair, we're gonna announce those winners at the same time that we announce science fair winners when we find those out. So all those things should come out Friday. Other than that, the students have been wonderful. We just launched a partnership with Novellus and the Hawks around recycling and having that challenge done by our students. And so we're excited about those partnerships. I'm done. Ms. Eldery, if you want to add anything, I don't think we've had a CAT meeting, but all my days are running together.
Correct. We
Good.
have not had a CAT meeting. There was another district test and assessment task force meeting, and the CAT engagement committee finished its engagement on test and assessment, and that information will be presented at the next CAT meeting, which is later this month. So that will come to you guys once it's presented to the CAT, and it will be presented to the district. There were 82 responses, and then there was about, I think, 20 people on the phone call.
You said 82 responses out of the whole cluster?
Out of the entire cluster, yep. And so the Go team members at each school were charged to push out the survey, and the principals were asked to push it out to staff and to students. And that is what we got back, but it is 82 more inputs than we had, because this was not an ask of the district for us to do. This was something the CAT did on its own. So it's 82 additional voices that we brought to the table. Would have been better if we would have had more. So, and the form is still open. So if anybody wants to add.
Thank you, Ms. Eldery. Announcements, please make sure you take your Go Team trainings, budgets, and ethics before our next meeting, because we need to have completed those to be able to vote. Any other announcements?
Curriculum previewing for ELA curricular resources are at Virginia Highland Elementary and Midtown High School. So if you want to preview any of those curricular resources before the districts make the final decision, that ends on Friday. And if you want to do 6 through 12 preview, that is at Midtown Elementary. Preview is at Virginia Highlands Elementary. And it's after school hours, but only for 2 hours a day, I think.
Thank you, Principal Hollis. Anything else? All right, our next meeting is March 11. It is in person, but there will be no public comment at that meeting, and that will be our final budget approval meeting. If there's no additional public comment, then I will take a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Is there a second? All right, and all those in favor? Aye. Thank you so much, everyone.
Bye.
Have a good evening.
Thank you. Good night.